Michigan Out of Doors. We're going to call up Jimmy Gretzinger up to the stage now, and please give him a warm river welcome here.
I think I've got this.
Oh, you got that?
Let me see. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. Can we get a round of applause for whoever cooked all that food? That was some really good food. And I was here, how many years have you guys been doing this dinner now? 9 years. So one of the first couple of years I was here, and so if you were here back then, was anybody here back 9 years ago? Oh, a few of you. Okay, you might hear some of the same stories tonight. But I feel very fortunate to be here tonight to get to talk with you. I feel very fortunate to have the job that I do with Michigan Out of Doors Television. If you're not familiar with Michigan Out of Doors Television, we are primarily a hunting and fishing show, probably 80% hunting and fishing. That was not a firearm. Thank you very much. And so we get to travel all over the state of Michigan. And one thing kind of different about Michigan Out of Doors is that we do 52 episodes a year. Most of the other outdoor shows around the country do 13. There's a few that do 26. We're crazy enough to try to do 52. And we travel all over the state of Michigan, from the west end of the Upper Peninsula, all the way down to the Detroit River and everywhere in between. And people tell me all the time, like, Jimmy, you have got the best job that there is. And I'm like, well, you don't know about the pressure and the time and trying to get something every week. And then I start thinking about it, and it's like, you know, I might actually have the best job that there is, you know? We love what we do. We get to tell your story. I think Michigan Out of Doors has worked for so many years because it's not about Jimmy Gretzinger. It's not about Jenny Olson, our co-host on the show. It's really about you. It's about the sportsmen and women of Michigan. And so I think that's why it's worked for so many years. And we're very fortunate to have the jobs that we do. Can anybody tell me who the first host of Michigan Outdoors was? Mort Neff, that's right. Actually saw a Mort Neff picture here tonight. And who took over after Mort? Jerry Geppetta, yeah, somebody said that over there. Jerry had the show for a couple years, and then who took over after Jerry? I heard his name out there. Fred Trost. Fred Trost had the show Michigan Outdoors for 20-some years. He ran into a little legal difficulty, would be the best way to say that, in kind of the late 80s, early 90s. Lost the show, and at that point, the Michigan United Conservation Clubs, or MUCC, bought that name, Michigan Outdoors, and restarted it with Bob Garner as the host back in 1993. I came along in 1998 as kind of the low man on the totem pole. 2001, took over as executive producer, and then at the beginning of 2009, I actually purchased the show from MUCC, so we're kind of doing it privately owned again, and we have a lot of fun. And we get to travel around the state, and one of the questions I get pretty frequently is, hey, what are some great stories you've been on, or what's some of your favorite stories that have, you know, that you've got to go on and all these adventures around the state, and they kind of change from year to year, but I'm just going to tell you a couple hunting stories that stick out over the last couple of years. This one was from last year, youth hunt, deer season. So not this one, but the one before. I had my, at that point, 9-year-old son in the blind with a buddy of mine, and he had his 9-year-old son. And we were over in West Michigan where I live, and it was an evening hunt. And so we had the little guys right in front of us in the box blind, and we said, okay, if the deer comes from this side, my son Charlie was going to get to shoot first, and if it came from the other side, my buddy's son was going to get to shoot first. And so we're sitting there, sure enough, here comes this doe. She's working out, and there's some standing corn, and we could kind of see her in the corn for probably about a half hour. So the kids were really, had a chance to kind of get worked up, and then they kind of had a chance to kind of settle down a little bit. Well, this doe comes out, gives us a good shot. Now, we were hunting with a muzzleloader, and really the effective range for what we were doing was about 50 yards, and this deer came out just about right there. And so deer steps out, my son Charlie, he's getting ready to take the shot, and I said, okay, when you're ready, go ahead and fire. Bang! And that's what happened. and so the smoke goes, we're using muzzleloader, smoke goes, we can't see it, deer goes running off. And so I'm watching, I got the camera going, so I'm videotaping all this and watching it, and deer runs off and stands there, and it's looking pretty fine at that point. So now it's at about 100 yards, and so my buddy's son, he's got his gun out there, and he's like, okay, go ahead and take the shot. Bam! And so I got the camera over there, and I got it all on the frame, and probably about 2 feet behind the deer and about 3 or 4 feet in front of the deer, you see the ground just go, poof, this big, where he hit with the bullet. And he turns to his dad, so I still had it on the deer, so you could see it hit the ground, deer runs out of the screen, and this little guy turns to his dad, he's like, Dad, I got him right behind the shoulder, right in the lungs. And he goes, no, son, you hit the dirt. And he goes, well, I might have done that too, he said. So, and then I panned the camera over to my son, Charlie, and I was like, were you shaking? And he's like, yeah. So those kind of stories, that one stuck out because it was just such a, and we didn't get a deer on that hunt, and I had more people tell me how much they enjoyed that hunt because of just the interaction in the blind, and so that story sticks out. That's one that stuck out. Who here has done any bear hunting before? Any bear hunters out there? A couple here, a couple here. Anybody done it with dogs before? A couple, okay. Well, we were doing a story a few years ago on how to train bear dogs. And we were up in the Upper Peninsula, and it was August, I believe. August, September. It was before the actual hunting season. So up there with probably 7 or 8 families, a bunch of kids running around, and they were camping up in the UP for 3 or 4 days. And so I went up there, and to hunt bear with dogs, you actually put a dog on the front of your truck, on the hood of your truck. And they have a little lead down to where they're kind of leashed onto there. Now, if you have a new truck, you have a spare hood. Most of these guys have old beater trucks, and so they just put them right there on the hood. So you have one dog up there called the strike dog, and then you have a bunch of more dogs in the back of the truck. The rest of, when you start running them, so you get them out and everything else. But the way you hunt them and how we were going to train these is you just cruise around the back roads of the Upper Peninsula, wherever you're going to be hunting, and you wait for the strike dog to smell a bear. And if a bear has crossed that road within the last 12 to 15 hours, amazingly enough, those dogs can smell it. So we're just cruising along, and you never know when it's going to happen, so we're just putzing along, and all of a sudden just, the first dog goes, and then all the other dogs go, and it's just awesome. The sound is something else. So we get out, and sure enough, there's the track, boom, boom, boom. We throw a couple dogs down, off they go. And so we were going to, we had all these trucks and families around, and so our plan was to, kind of coordinate where everybody's going to be, and then we were all going to try to converge on if we could get a bear up a tree. And so they take off, and so we get on the radio. Okay, we just got one going, and then so and so is over here in their truck, and they're like, oh yeah, I hear them. They're heading west. And then somebody else, another part of the woods, oh, they just went north. They're going north. It's just fun and exciting. And so sure enough, once they get a bear up a tree, their barking kind of localizes. Sounds a little different, and so that had happened. And so we were the closest truck to where they had the bear treed. And so we were going to go in there, get some video. We're going to bring everybody in, take pictures, and then we would all pull out. The bear comes down and goes on about its business because it wasn't the hunting season yet, just training dogs. And so we get in there to the tree, and sure enough, here's this beautiful Michigan black bear up a tree. And I'm getting some video of it, and the dogs are all there. And what they would normally do is tie off the dogs. So they'd get a leash around them, get them tied to a tree, so everybody's just kind of knows where everybody is, and there's no excitement or whatever if the bear comes down. So we hadn't done that quite yet, and so they had put some younger dogs down as they were training these younger dogs to come in on the scent trail. And I guess they're supposed to come in quiet, not barking. And I never heard this. They explained what happened to me afterwards, because what had happened is these dogs came in. As they got pretty close to the tree, they started barking. What happened was these dogs here heard the barking that I never heard, and I guess what they thought was, hey, we've caught this one. Somebody's got one over here. Let's all go over there. And so all the dogs were gone. And I thought, I wonder what that's going to do to them. And I looked up, and all I said was, here he comes, because he was coming down right now. And if you've ever seen a bear go up and down a tree, they can fly up and down a tree. So he's coming down the tree. I start backing up, and I'm videotaping this bear coming down. And John, the guy that we were with, well, he didn't want this bear to come down that tree. So he whips off one of his dog leashes, and he's yelling at this bear, and it's coming down. He starts hitting the tree with the leash, yelling at the bear. The bear's coming down, chomping his jaws, making all sorts of noise. It gets lower and lower and lower, and his leash is down here, and then it was up here, and the bear's low enough where he's actually hitting the bear in the butt with the dog leash. And I'm videotaping this thinking, I can never show this to anybody. I can't put this on TV. And I'm like, and this bear is going to jump on his head I was certain that I was going to see this thing just attack him. So I'm backing up, hitting trees, videotaping this, and he's hitting the bear. And now the dogs hear all this, so now all the dogs come back in. They're going crazy. The bear's right there. It was just chaotic. And so finally the bear is like, all right, I had enough of this. So he just kind of eases back up the tree, sits on a limb. And we were able to get everybody in, take their pictures and everything. But I'll never forget, John standing that bear goes back up, and he turns to me and he goes, boy, that was a close one, he says. And I was like, that story sticks out. Last story, this one was an elk hunt that we were doing out in Colorado. And if you were here 9 years ago, you probably heard this story. It was my dad, a buddy of mine, and myself, last day of an elk hunt in Colorado. We weren't taping for the show. We were just out there to hunt. And we see this group of elk going up over this little rise. And we did the old thing that most hunters do. Let's head them off at the pass. Let's try to get around in front of them. So we did. So we get around in front of them. And I kind of got around in the stuff. And there was this big wall of thick stuff. I don't know what kind of tree it was. We call it a scrub oak tree, but I don't really know what it was. But it's real thick. You can't even really see through it. And it came down just like this to about a wall, just kind of like this here. And then there was this huge valley off to my right. You could see for miles. But they were in this thick stuff. And so we were bow hunting. So I knock an arrow and I just kind of pick a spot. And I figured, well, it's as good as any. And out right about where that speaker is, out steps a cow elk. And we were only hunting for bull elk at the time. And they had to have 4 on a side to be legal. So this cow steps out. She's looking at me and I'm looking at her. And I'm in perfect spot. I'm thinking, oh, this is perfect. These are all going to walk right out. Well, out steps next to her a spike bull elk. And my wind, though, was blowing right to them. So I knew I was not in a great situation, but I figured they'd just kind of all be cycling out. Well, they're looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and finally they say, well, something's not quite right here. So they spook, and they run down through this valley. So when they spook and do that and kind of make some noise when they go, I stand up because I think, okay, something's going to happen, because I figure the rest of these elk are going to hear that. They're going to start coming out. So I stand up, and I get ready, and right behind me, I hear coming through this thick stuff that you can't even really see. So I kind of turn like this, and probably about a pace or two back from where that wall is was another spike bull elk. And he was coming out. And by the time I turned around like this, he had just closed half the distance, and he's coming out. Now, a spike bull, when they're just looking at you, their spikes kind of go almost back a little bit. So they don't go straight up, they don't come out, they just kind of go back like this, which is key for in a minute. And so he's coming out, and I turn, and so I face him like this, and I just get the bow out of the way, and I don't have time to dive or anything. I just kind of lean like this, and this elk is coming out, and I actually had the thought of, this elk might actually rub up against me when he comes flying out of here. And I remember I had that thought. I was like, boy, that's going to be something, And so I lean like this, and he's coming out, and right at the last minute, he puts his head down like this to go through that last little bush and turns left, which is exactly where I was standing. So the last thing I saw was his forehead coming up, and it's like someone took a 2x4 and just smashed it across your forehead. We hit forehead to forehead. I flew back through the air. Bow broke. I land, and it was right away. It swelled up. I had a cut here and a cut here. And my buddy saw the whole thing. He was about 50, 60 yards back behind me. He comes running up there, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm, rolling around I'm like, "I don't know." And I'm feeling around. I don't know if I got stepped on or what. And he's like, "Well, you're bleeding." And so we get a glove off, and we were kind of putting pressure on it, and it kind of stops, and, pretty quick. And he's like, "Is everything else okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's checking me over and kind of starts giggling a little bit. And then he starts laughing. And he laughed so hard he about wet himself, and he was like, "Jimmy," he's like, "Dude, you just got run over by an elk," he said. And I was like, "Ugh." But that story sticks out. That's one of those stories that stick out. And they wouldn't let me drive back to Michigan because they were certain I had a concussion. So that was the last day of our hunt, so we drove home. That's a true story. And, if we had time tonight with all these sportsmen and women in here, we could get a lot of you up here to tell stories. And we as sportsmen, we love to tell hunting stories. We love to hear hunting stories. I got to hear some tonight. And it's just fun. We just love it, But I think we as sportsmen have to do a better job of telling our hunting stories. What do I mean by that? We got to tell them to new people, of course. Anybody who will listen, you got to tell your hunting stories too. But you and I have to do a better job of telling our stories in a way that non-hunters can understand. I'm sure we have a lot of non-hunters in here tonight as well. And just think about it. You probably have a hunter in your life. Maybe it's your husband, you're here with your wife, and you probably have done this before. I've done it. You come home from a hunting trip. Let's say you're out pheasant hunting, and you come back and you're like, "Honey, look at this." And it's a picture of a pile of dead pheasants. Well, to a non-hunter, they're like, "Okay, what does this mean?" Or maybe you've shown a picture of your buck to a buddy that doesn't hunt. You're like, "Hey, look at this," and they're like, "Okay, I don't get it." There's this disconnect because they don't really know all that went into that, but we expect them just to understand hunting and fishing because we show them this picture. But we've got to do a better job of telling people why we love to hunt and fish in a way that they can understand. Because just think about it for a minute. What are the reasons that you love to hunt and fish? Just think about it for a second. I know for me, just getting away from the craziness of life, just unplugging, leaving that cell phone in the truck. I mean, just getting away from all the noise. I love to hunt because of that. Another reason I love to hunt and fish is because I love to spend time with friends and family. I mean, you think about the allure of deer camp. Many of you maybe travel around the state, go to deer camp, and we have one up in Indian River area, just a little shack in the woods, outhouse, pump well. And I get to stay there by myself from time to time as I travel around the state. And that's okay. But come November the 14th, when there's like 8 or 10 guys there, I mean, that place transforms into this magical place called deer camp, and it's about who is there. It's about friends and family. So that's a big reason why we love to hunt and fish. Another one is just having an adventure. When you think about it, when you hit the woods or the water, you don't know what's going to happen. It is an adventure. So you just take those three, and there's a lot more reasons why we love to hunt and fish, but just take those. Unplugging from the craziness of life, getting away with friends and family, having an adventure. Well, those are things that anybody can relate to. But so many times when we tell our hunting stories, we just show a picture of a bunch of dead critters, and we don't tell people why we love to hunt and fish in a way that they can understand by talking about some of those things. And it happened a few years ago, like a ton of bricks. I saw this just play out right in front of me. My wife, who had never really done much hunting growing up, I got her to go hunting one year. And we were having some friends over for New Year's Eve. And it was actually the buddy that ran up on the elk with me. He and his wife were coming over. And our wives get together, and my buddy's wife says to my wife, she's like, I can't believe it. You went over to the dark side and became a hunter. How could you do that, you know? And so my wife says, no, it was a lot of fun. So my buddy's wife said, well, how could that have been fun? So I got to hear my wife tell a hunting story. Totally different than how I typically would tell a hunting story. She said, well, we were going out to South Dakota for 5 days. So we had to get all 3 kids watched for 5 days. That almost sold her on hunting right there. You know, just 5 days, no kids, seriously? So she said, well, you know, when we were going to South Dakota in the first week of the season, you can't actually start hunting until noon. So she said, you know what we did every morning? We slept in every morning. It's about as long as we'd want. And you know what? We'd go out for breakfast. You know, we'd hit some of the different breakfast places around the town, different one every morning, and, you know, have a nice breakfast. And then this was the hunting for us. She said, we'd come back, get our hunting stuff on. We'd go hunt for a little bit. Then we'd come back. Guys would take care of the birds. And then, you know, we'd kind of get cleaned up, take a shower, and then, you know, we'd just staying in the town. So we'd go out for dinner, you know, maybe try a new spot, you know, this night. And, you know, we got to see some really nice restaurants. And then she'd say, you know, we'd come back to the hotel, and, you know, no kids, and we didn't have a whole lot going on. So maybe we'd watch a movie at the, you know, in the hotel room, just relax and hang out. And we could stay up late because, you know what, we were sleeping in the next morning. We had nothing to get up for. And then we'd go out for breakfast again. And my wife's buddy turns to him and says, why don't you ever tell me those parts of the hunting and fishing trips, you know? I mean, and she grew up in a hunting and fishing family. It just didn't get all the other stuff that goes into a hunting and fishing trip and into a hunting and fishing story. To her, it was just a pile of dead bluegills or a dead deer. And there was all this other stuff that goes into it. But my wife told her about those other things, and she was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So if you and I start doing a better job of telling our stories and telling people why we love to hunt and fish, 2 things can happen. One, maybe they'll want to try hunting and fishing. And for those of you that have taken somebody new into the outdoors, you know how awesome it is to see the sunrise on a duck marsh or the turkey woods or out fishing. To see that through the eyes of somebody who's never done it before, that is an awesome thing. So maybe they'll want to try hunting and fishing, but just as important, maybe even more important, is sooner or later we're going to be voting on another hunting and fishing related issue. And the media is going to paint sportsmen as bloodthirsty thugs who just love to shoot stuff. But if you and I start doing a better job of telling our neighbor who's not a hunter why we love to hunt and fish in a way that they can understand, maybe he will say, you know what? I see how they're portraying sportsmen on that. I know Bob next door. He's a duck hunter, and he's not like what I say. He loves to hunt and fish with his kids because that's the 3 days he gets with just them when they're home from college. I mean, that's the kind of thing we want to start changing the mindset of people to let them know that there's so much more that goes into hunting and fishing than just taking game. And we're not apologizing for taking game. That's a big part of what we do. But if you and I do a better job of telling our stories in a way that people can understand, hopefully we'll be able to keep this legacy here in the great state of Michigan of hunting and fishing. So that's the first challenge for you tonight. If you're a sportsman out there, tell your hunting stories to new people this year, but tell them why you love to hunt and fish in a way that they can understand. Second thing I want to talk about tonight, since we're here and this is put on by a church, and we're telling hunting stories and all sorts of stories, I think it's only fair to bring God's story into tonight and kind of his story in my life. And so I just want to share that a little bit with you. And I kind of grew up going to a church, probably not too dissimilar from what the river is. You know, we were one of those families that we went all the time. We went Sunday morning, we went Sunday night, we went Wednesday night, I think we had something. Thursday night was youth group. So growing up church, God, religion, Jesus, all this stuff was just, part of my life. It was just, if my life was a pie, it was a piece of the pie. It wasn't more important, less important. It was just kind of there. It just didn't affect me when I wasn't there. It just was kind of there. That's what it was. What changed for me, I went off to Michigan State University. First 2 years I was there, I did about everything you hope your kid doesn't do. That when they go, you hope they don't do these things, and I did all those things. And after about 2 years, I was like, God, and the whole time I'm going to church. I went to church almost every Sunday those first couple of years at Michigan State, but you could not have there was no evidence in my life that I went to church on Sundays. Nothing. And so I remember I got to a point in my life where I'm like, God, is this it? I mean, what happened was he kind of introduced me to this group called Campus Crusade for Christ. And I think it was the first time in my life I saw a group of guys, about 4 or 5 guys that I got into a little small group kind of thing with. And I think it was the first time in my life I saw guys my own age that they weren't just the Christian thing and doing these guys were Christ followers. There was something different about their life. There was just something more. They had more peace, more patience, more excitement, more joy. It was just something, you could see it in their life. There was something different that they had that I didn't have. See, for me, that relationship that I had with God was just kind of something that I did. It was just kind of there. For them, that relationship with God was the number one priority in their life. Number one. And we were asking the same kind of things, as we're getting out of school, where am I going to work? Who am I going to marry? What am I going to do? All that kind of stuff. But they were asking the questions a little bit differently. How has God designed me? What do I love? What can I do to help people see him? Where does he want me to work? Who does he want me to marry? It was just a different mindset. That relationship with God for them was the number one priority in their life. And I saw that, and I was like, you know what? I want to do that. So I said, God, I'm going to slide out of the driver's seat here. I want you to take control. I want this relationship with you through the person of Jesus to be the number one priority in my life. And when I did that, I saw amazing things happen, because I was over here kind of doing my own thing, kind of frustrated, not sure what I was going to do, just kind of angry, just frustrated, not sure what was going to happen. And so as I started to give him more and more control, he started to move me from where I was to where he wanted me to be. And the Bible talks about an abundant life. Well, you know what that is, really, in just easy terms? It's just doing what God wants you to do, where he wants you to do it, and how he wants you to do it. You don't always do it perfectly, but I got to see some of those things in my own life that I saw in these other guys. I started to experience what I was seeing in these other guys' life, because this relationship with God became the number one priority. And it changed my life. And I think all of us here in this room tonight could probably be lumped into one of 3 groups. First group, you're here tonight and you're like, Jimmy, what in the world are you talking about? Relationship with God, what does that even mean? I mean, how does that affect me tomorrow when I go off to work? Or what does that mean? And if you're here tonight and you have no idea, this idea of a relationship with God is something new to you, and you're like, yeah, I've always kind of wondered what these churchy people are like, and maybe you haven't set foot in a church in 15 years, and you're in that group and you're like, yeah, I just don't quite get it. Well, if you are here tonight and that's you, I would really encourage you to talk with somebody that brought you, talk with somebody that put this dinner on. If you don't feel comfortable talking to them tonight, call this church sometime later in the week and just say, hey, you know what, I'd like to talk to somebody about a relationship with God. I was at that wild game day. I just want to, and you're not going to be putting anybody out. The whole reason that this church exists is to draw you into a close relationship with God. They would love to talk with you. So if you're in that first group and you're not sure about how does Jesus play into all that, and how does this work in my everyday life, and what could a relationship with God do for me? If that's you in group 1, you've got to get those questions answered. There's nothing more important than what you're going to do with what Jesus says and the claims that he makes. So if you'd like to know more about that, I would really encourage you to check this church out on a Sunday. If you live in a different area, get a hold of this church. They'll find a Bible preaching church wherever you are. That's group 1. Group 2, you're here tonight and you are a lot like me kind of growing up. You do the church thing. You kind of go on Sundays and you maybe give a little money in the plate, but that really, and you kind of have a relationship with God. You've kind of started that. You kind of get the whole concept, but it's just kind of there. It doesn't affect the way you talk with your buddies at the bowling alley, around the golf course. It doesn't affect the way you treat your spouse. It doesn't affect the way you raise your kids. It doesn't affect your language when you're out at the bar with your buddies. It doesn't affect really anything in your life other than just you kind of do it. I got a little bit of church. I got a little bit of Jesus. That's fine. If that's you tonight, because that was me for a long time, if that's you, you are just flat missing out. You are missing out on so many great things that God wants to do in your life, through you and for you and to you. You are just missing out. So I would really encourage you to say, okay, what would it look like to maybe take that relationship with God, maybe take a step forward in that. Maybe that's Start to attend church a little bit more regular. Maybe that's getting into a small group. Maybe that's talk to somebody here and say, I'd like to kind of recommit to really kind of making this a bigger priority in my life. They would love to talk with you. The folks that put this dinner on would love to talk to you about that. That would be the challenge for you. Group 3, you're here tonight. You have the biggest challenge of all. You go to church. Maybe you're serving here tonight. You've got an orange shirt, and you're like, come on, yep, I could get up there right now and talk about my relationship with God and what it means in my life and how he's, some great stories. But if you're here tonight and you're in group 3 and you're walking with God, you have people in your life right now that are in group 2 and are in group 1. Now, what are you doing? What am I doing to help walk them slowly into a deeper relationship with God? Because the Bible asks us to be disciples. It also asks us to make disciples. What are you doing? What am I doing to take those people that are in our coworkers, family, whatever it is, and walk them into a deeper relationship with God? Are there people looking at you? Are there people looking at me the way I was looking at those guys in college and saying, you know what, there is something different about their life? Is there something different about your life? Or does it just blend in with everybody else's? Are you doing something different? When I saw those guys, they were living a life that was really focused on that relationship with God was the number one thing in their life. And it was very evident. So group 3, your challenge, what are you doing? What am I doing to walk those people into a deeper relationship with God? So our first challenge tonight was really for you sportsmen out there, just to tell your hunting stories to new people, but tell them why you love to hunt and fish. And the other challenge for all of us here, whether you haven't set foot in a church in 15 years, or whether you've been a pastor for 30 years, God wants to be a bigger priority in your life than what he is right now. And the more you will let him take control, the more incredible things you're going to see in your life. Thank you so much for letting me yap at you tonight. And if I don't get a chance to talk to you, make sure you tune in every Thursday night and then again on the weekends for Michigan Out of Doors on your PBS station. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and like to see more like it, join us at plumcrazyoutdoors.com.